Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. This is not the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. Polish Prime Minister Minister Morawiecki referred to the famous Churchillian quotation when describing the multifaceted crisis in Europe after meeting President of France Emmanuel Macron. Morawiecki called for urgent reform of European Union energy policy, in particular the emissions trading scheme, which in his opinion should be capped at €30 per tonne of carbon dioxide. What we are dealing with today is not even the end of the war in Ukraine. Unfortunately, it is not even the beginning of the end. Maybe we are just dealing with the end of the beginning of the crisis, which is still developing on many levels. And that's why our response needs to be patient, balanced, but also, of course, firm. We had better not find out that the Ukrainians have more strength under Russian bombs that are falling on them, more strength, patience and resistance than us, Europeans, who are sometimes hesitant to lower our thermostats by 2 degrees. Europe is now in a sort of geopolitical nap, and in the meantime, someone else is furnishing the world, not necessarily the way we want. That is why we either quickly wake up or time will slip through our fingers and Europe will lose its significance in the geopolitical arrangement. Here in France, you don't need to explain to anyone what it means to be one for all for one, the old Musketeers' motto. This is a motto we should stick to, even if we differ in some matters. We will also speak about our vision for Europe in the coming years, the enlargement and the recognition of candidate status for adhesion for Ukraine and Moldova, France's position for a European political community, and we will have a first meeting in Prague in the coming weeks. I will continue to defend this idea, which to me is important, of having political and geopolitical convergence even beyond the European Union with those who plan to become candidates. In the short term, the situation around the Zaporizhzhia plant is of course what worries us the most. We have done everything these past few days to help organise the IAEA mission. I spoke on the telephone yesterday with Director General Rafael Grossi before he left early this morning for Ukraine. We have a common worry. First of all, nuclear safety and security should not be made fragile by this war. And so this mission is important. It should preserve this plant and the safety and security of the entire region. Poland and France have been fighting for several months to reinforce this energy sovereignty and to deeply reform the electricity market. I wish us to fulfill this dynamic and to really have an electricity supply protected from elements of speculation and renovated in terms of identifying prices, since our countries today are the victims of price formulas and basic market hypotheses that no longer correspond to reality. I wish for us to move forward very quickly. We have already called for this several months ago, and the coming weeks will be critical on this. Referring to the European economy, Morawiecki said that he had earlier suggested a profound reform to the EU emissions trading system, to both the French President and the European Community President. So I'll do that paragraph again. Referring to the European economy, Morawiecki said that he had earlier suggested a profound reform to the EU emissions trading system to both the French President and the European Commission President. The current system of the EU emission allowances is another burden falling on the already high energy prices, he said. We should take advantage of the fact that this tool, namely the ETS system, is in our European hands and we should lower prices. Both in the European Union and the European Commission have appropriate mechanisms to bring down prices to, for instance, €30, he said, adding that the current price stood between 80 and €90 and had been pushing up inflation. Morawiecki added that the meeting also focused on Polish-French economic cooperation in the nuclear and renewable energy industries. The Polish-German Environmental Council met in the German town of Bad Saro near Berlin. Polish Environment Minister Anna Moskwa and her German counterpart, Steffi Lemke of the Greens, spoke about the recent crisis at the Odra River. Both governments wish to end the research by September the 30th at the latest. The German side tried to use the natural disaster to stop investment in the river infrastructure. Anna Moskwa recalled an international agreement from 2015 that describes the responsibilities for flood protection of citizens and drought prevention. According to Minister Moskwa, Poland will not stop any works. With these investments, or rather with these modernisation tasks, there was too much media coverage and voices from uninvolved parties, and perhaps not enough work from the German side based on concrete documents. There was too little willingness to understand our actions. There is neither a formal nor a rational basis to stop our actions. The General Directorate of Environmental Protection has now launched a series of activities concerning the Oder River so as to determine the extent of the damage. We were criticised by the same entities that a year ago demanded an immediate halt and closure of the Turów power plant and did not take into account the interests and energy security of the residents of those regions.
uważam, że przede wszystkim...
I believe that the most important thing now is to repair the consequences of the disaster and to activate the National Regeneration Forces, which we must not hold back. So we should act in a different way on the rivers if we want to reconcile flood protection, navigation and the use of the river as a source of drinking water. Poland has received only symbolic support from Germany during the time of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Polish Minister of Defence Morawiecki said, referring to the offer of 20 Leopard 2 main battle tanks offered by Poland's western neighbour, with delivery as soon as next year. We are not waiting to see whether or not our allies, I'm thinking here mainly of the Germans, will eventually decide to give us those 20 Leopard tanks. The reason I say this, with a wince, is that the support from Germany is symbolic, Morawiecki said. He said that so far the German Defence Ministry had failed to answer a letter explaining Poland's needs. He added that in order to deter Russia from its plans to rebuild its empire, we are arming the Polish army, developing the Polish army in numbers, and also strengthening relations within NATO. I am convinced that this will result in the fact that an aggressor will not attack us, for the reason that we will be strong, firmly rooted in NATO alliance relations, and for the reason that Polish society, the Polish people who are aware of these challenges, will stand by the wall behind the Polish uniform. He also referred to contracts for the supply of tanks and howitzers from South Korea, or American Abrams tanks for the Polish army. An engine problem forced NASA on Monday to postpone for at least 4 days the debut launch of the new Artemis rocket, which it hopes will one day fly astronauts back to the moon, more than half a century after Apollo's last lunar mission. The United States Space Agency cited a problem on one of the Space Launch System's rocket's main engines, as launch teams began a test that would have cooled the engines for liftoff. One of them would not cool as expected.
We don't launch until it's right. And in fact, they've got a problem with the gases going on the engine bleed on one engine. You can't go. There are certain guidelines. And I think it's just illustrative that this is a very complicated machine, a very complicated system, and all those things have to work. And you don't want to light the candle until it's ready to go.
The delay was called Art 835 EDT, 2 minutes after the targeted launch time, as the 32-story tall rocket and its Orion capsule awaited liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The mission, dubbed Artemis 1, calls for a 6-week uncrewed test flight of Orion around the moon and back to Earth for a splashdown in the Pacific. NASA did not give a new launch date for the two-stage rocket, but said its first available opportunity was Friday, the 2nd of September. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, have a good night and a better tomorrow.